Hello, I'm Greg. I'm guitar tech for Björn KLOTZ within Flames, and I'm here to do a little bit of talking about the rig we use today. We've made some changes very recently. Some of you have seen rig rundowns before, and there's some new things in the rig, so let's have a chat about them. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about Björns guitars. The Epiphone, this one was called the Gelotte. These are copies of Björn's Les Paul Custom. The last 16 years he was playing that guitar when I joined, and he had it before. It's his favourite guitar, had a lovely neck on it. So when he decided to retire that and bring in, to discuss with Epiphone making the signature model, that's what they copied. So the neck is close to a 57 profile-ish, but it's a little bit refined to match his exactly. Those of you that know In Flames play in either C standard or drop B flat. C standard, some of the older songs, I think all the new stuff's recorded in B flat now. Because of that, we have to use a much heavier string gauge. Your 10 to 42 or 10 to 56 would never handle those tensions. So we're using a 12 to 68 coated. These are from Jim Dunlop. First two strings are plain, the other four wound. You'll find your transition from wound to plain, there's a sense of being sharp. So I tune that 3 cents flat, and then I do the same on the B flat. We tune that 3 cents flat as well, and it smooths the tuning off. So if you tune everything completely standard, it'll always sound a little bit sharp around here and a little bit sharp around here. That's just a trick I picked up over years, but I found what works for Björn and what works for me. So yeah, we're using coated strings, not for string life. Björn has a nickel allergy, so Dunlop have been producing these strings for him for a long time, and the coating just prevents contact with the actual nickel, which makes a massive difference. For wireless, we're using the Shure digital Accent, and I've just started using these. This is the first one I've got. I'm getting some more later, the Richter belt pack pouches. Doesn't affect Björn at all, but it makes my day a bit less of a mission. If anything happens to the belt pack, I can just switch it faster, replace batteries, that sort of thing. So in terms of tunings, we have the B flat and the C standard. So I have the two white guitars tuned for drop B flat, and those do the bulk of the set. And we've got 5 songs in C on this set, and these guitars are tuned to C standard. Exactly the same string gauges. No difference at all, really. I mean, this guitar had a slightly different production run. We didn't have the bottle opener on the back, which the white ones do have. If I'm honest, the bottle opener is fun, but of very little use because you pour beer on your shoes. So yeah, these are the old, this was the first generation, which, yeah, same thing, 85, 81. Just a good solid little guitar. And, you know, it's all it takes. Keep it simple. The newest device we have, we're now using the Synergy amplifiers, switched over from Marshall. Time for a change, basically. I'm really impressed with these Synergy amps. They have given us that flexibility we needed, the great distortion tone, and we can build a good clean tone into the same amp. So where we used to have 3 effectively different amplifiers in the rig, redundancy being what it is, if something blows up you need a backup, we now have 3 identical amps, so we can deliver exactly the same tone no matter what happens, which, if you ask me, is probably the most important thing we can have. We're looking for reliability and obviously all tube, and these are doing all of that. So let's have a look at what we're doing. We've gone back to some more classic In Flames starting point with the PV6505. With the way Björn plays, he's changed over time. We all evolve as people, as players. So this is giving the right sort of tight, aggressive distortion without being over the top. There's not too much extraneous hiss. There's none of that sort of, the more Marshall-y sound, I hate to say this about Marshall, there's the more sort of the hissier, scratchier gain. This has tightened up considerably over that, so that's working perfectly for rhythm and for lead channel. We're using the same basic distortion for both. And over here we have the Dumble OS for the clean and the crunch sounds. Again, a nice, rich, glassy clean, just enough breakup. And then the crunch, which we don't use a huge amount of, but just again, just a nice little bit of grit without being overly saturated. Using everything very simply, we still run 3 heads, one as a backup. We have 1 amp for distortion sounds, 1 amp for clean sounds. The main reason for using separate amplifiers is we have completely different microphones and cabinets for clean and distortion. There's a tendency, if you're having to use 1 cab, you have to compromise somewhere. Either your distortion tone has to be EQ'd a little bit differently, or you're clean. With this, we can have exactly what we want on both channels. Distortion channels, 2 large diaphragm condenser microphones from SE. The clean channel, we use 2 ribbon microphones, both from an isolation cabinets from Box of Doom. We're using Celestion drivers. So I have a Celestion cream back for the clean sounds, which handles that nice warm push. And with this, we're now using the EVH G12 driver, which again is a lovely driver. We were using vintage 30s. They work, I mean, as a good metal driver, the vintage 30 is great, but they do have a slightly more aggressive, again, scratchier tone than we wanted. And everything's got to be tightened up to make the playing easier and make the guitar push and punch better. So all of those little changes have brought us into a much nicer, tighter sound for live. I wouldn't say it's closer to the albums, because albums, obviously, there's multiple tracks of guitar, there's multiple amps in play. But for the live sound, we've now got this really tight, solid, in-flame sound again, where things had started to drift a little. So that's the amplifiers. There's not very much else going on with those. So we go into signal. Now, with any rig, we've got signal input from the guitar. We have to manage that. So everything else really is about managing that signal coming in. We're using the Shure wireless, the new Axient stuff. Digital is behaving really well. We have 4 guitars, 2 for each tuning, a main and a spare, so we've got redundancy again if a string breaks, if a wireless pack breaks, if we have wireless interference. Then this is handling both channels. Both channels are always on, which is what we're now using the JX44 with radial for. So both channels are off, both channels are on. And this means that if I have to make a guitar swap in a hurry, there's no switching. I can just hand him another guitar and he can be playing immediately. We can have 2 guitars playing at once. This is something I saw Metallica doing with James Hetfield. I was talking to their tech about how you're getting these really smooth guitar swaps. This thing is an absolute lifesaver. I was using a little line mixer to deal with the summing of the inputs, but this is taking that out of the equation. So we've basically reduced a stage at which we can add or subtract gain, which is better. I want as clean a signal as possible. We go from that, slightly unusually, straight into a tuner feed. And this has a sister on the cabinet with just a Boss tuner. The idea being that Björn can walk over to the cab, push that, it mutes the rig, he can tune, hit that, and carry on playing, and there's no signal going on stage. This is one of the things I'm so passionate about, is keeping all guitar signal off the floor. Pedal boards, anything running down stage that has a guitar signal in it is an immediate point where someone can break a cable, drop a microphone, trip over something, plug something, unplug something. Anything on stage that can go bump, thump, clonk, knock into a guitar rig, that's gone. Everything's in here. So we go from this, when we're in rock, obviously, we go into the decimator, which takes out some of our initial noise. This is more to do with controlling guitar signal. We're not having to deal with hums and background hiss very much at all. The rig's very quiet. I'll get onto that in a minute, but for now, so input, channel 1, input gate. This then runs into good old GCX, which handles all our loops. And in loop 1, I've got a Crybaby rack mount wah. This is always on. Doesn't use it very often on the clean, it has been known, but Björn's main solo sound will always be using a wah. And some of the other songs, there's points at which he wants, so that's always switched on, it's always in a loop, it's always active. And then coming over here, we then have MXR chorus and a carbon copy delay. These sit in front of the clean amp. And the purpose of the chorus and delay is just to give it a little bit of space, a little bit of air. You could also use a reverb unit, but I prefer just a tiny bit of slap back on the delay and a little bit of chorus, just opens everything up, fills it, makes it feel much more natural. and much more playable. So that's in one loop, so they're linked. It's just one effect stacked. And then for the solo sound, I won't switch that now because it's not, the MIDI is not linked. We have a power EQ, which boosts a load of the mids, takes some of the high and some of the low end out, and again a delay. And these are both within the effects loop of the Synergy. So the Synergy is running an effects loop into the GCX. The GCX then manages what's in the effects loop and out again. This gets around the whole problem of having a switchable effects loop. It's always there, it's always active, and I can then gate the back end of the amp as well, which is what the second gate does. That's also in the effects loop. And that provides us a little bit more control. You don't want too much gating, obviously you start affecting things with delays, but before the delay, the gate sits there just to prevent the guitar from taking off. Because certainly within Flame Sound, there's a very aggressive, very abrupt stops in some of the songs. Some of the songs are open and they breathe and they flow and you can open the gates a little, but sometimes that hard stop, if it's followed by a it's a living hell. We don't want it, so that's what it's there for. And then, so going from all that, goes through the amps, and the amp outputs all come to a rack mount panel at the bottom. So all my cabinets, all my stage control, all runs through the bottom here. Again, nothing magical, it's just, it gives me the option of plugging things in quickly if we need to move fast on stage, festival stages, clearing quickly. I can drop these cables, power down, and the whole rig can move in 3 minutes, which in terms of clearing the stage fast is quite important. I mean, Iron Maiden used to insist on having a clear stage within 5 minutes, and we can hit that without any problems at all. So it's from a working point of view, it's very valuable. Now, we've been using KLOTZ cable for a while. This is our stage spare. If everything goes horribly wrong, that thing will cover the 20 or so meters of stage we have here and then some. So we've moved over, so we've been using KLOTZ for a long time now. Moved over to the KLOTZ Lagrange for the instrument side of things. Inside the rig, it's a little bit different. Most of these cables are directional. Now, the purpose of that being is we're managing to remove some of that noise floor. You're always looking for an amp. If you turn an amplifier on and plug a cable and a guitar into it, that's your noise floor. That's as quiet as you're ever going to get it. So the quieter the cable, better. Starting from then, everything you add into a rig potentially adds noise. You've got electric fields and everything else. So the idea of directional cables is to dissipate some of those electric fields and quieten the rig down. So almost all of this is using KLOTZ balanced patch cable. I can never remember the name of these things. So effectively this is an XLR cable. It's the sort of thing you'd use in a studio for patching audio. And you solder the shield at the output end, and then at the input end of the cable, you have the shield just literally open to air. It doesn't connect to anything. In a secured rig like this, it provides a much, much more stable, much quieter sound. All the signal runs one direction. All the buffers in there are just keeping everything as quiet as it can. The signal is about as pure as we can get it. So let's look at the Boxer Doom isolation cabinet, which is another one of the tricks we're using for our live sound. A microphone on stage will always pick up external noise. So you'll get bleed from drums, from vocals, all kinds of things. Vocal mics are particularly susceptible to drum bleed, cymbals and such likes. So with guitars, the obvious fix is to use isolation cabinets. This means you can have a microphone that isn't going to pick up any other frequencies you don't want it to. The other fix, of course, is to use gates, but that immediately means that you're cutting some of the signal. So this is the Boxer Doom. It's a single 12-inch driver, mounted as it should be, as they're designed to be mounted. Then we have two microphones on a cradle. On this is the clean one, the clean cab. So we have the two ribbon microphones, output straight to the console. Input comes in from the guitar cab. It's a really simple idea, but it works very, very well. Now there's arguments that you get a speaker in a box will sound like a speaker in a box, but it's a very, very pure sound. So the minute that goes to the console, we can EQ it, and it will always sound the same. It will always sound clean. There's no gates filtering out frequencies. It's just pure guitar, which means at front of house and in monitors, certainly for the mix, you're dealing with just one thing. You're not trying to sort of filter out symbols. So if I was going to say, you know, a piece of magic, this is it. The equivalent today would be using IRs. You know, the Synergy amps have some of them have the IR out, and that's being rolled out across more models. So that's another way of working around it. Certainly lighter, these things are 65 kilos each. But since we can carry them, we do.